So yeah, good morning everyone. Thank you CPP India for giving me opportunity once again to present on another topic. So in today's topic, we are going to talk about what is meant by SIMD and what is meant by auto vectorization. So the goal of this talk is that at the end of this session, you will be able to know that, okay, what does SIMD means, how it benefits in respect to the performance. Then we will also try to understand how we can take advantage of this feature, which is available in almost every CPU nowadays. Then we'll talk about what is auto vectorization and how compilers are going smart day by day to whatever code you are writing in C or C++, they can emit a SIMD instructions. And then we will also at the end of the session, we'll see that what options compiler does provide to you, which you can pass and get information that whether a particular loop is getting vectorized or not. If it is getting vectorized, then what are the parameters it is using to get it vectorized. What we are not going to cover in this session is we are not going to talk about any specific architectural details about SIMD. We're not going to talk about how Intel does, how ARM does, how AMD does. We are not going to. This is a very general talk. We'll also not talk about what algorithms compiler uses in the backend to analyze these for loops, because there is a lot of research goes, there is a lot of compiler theories goes behind that, and that's not suitable, I think. So then we'll not talk about these things. So let's start. So we'll just see what kinds of parallelism are available in modern systems nowadays, and we'll categorize them in software and hardware things. Then we'll see a very classic Saxby loop, which is nothing but AX plus BY vector loop. Then we'll see like how it works on a scalar model and vector model. When I say scalar, it is like you're doing one operation. When I say vector, it's like a bunch of operations are getting done at one time. So don't get confused with when I say vector to std vector. Then we'll talk about a little bit about a SIMD architecture. Then we'll talk about what are the different techniques a developer can use to take advantage of these SIMD instructions. Then we'll also cover about auto vectorization, and at the end of session, we'll see 4-5 examples, which I will run on Godbolt live, where we can analyze that, okay, why the compiler is not able to auto vectorize the code and how we can tweak the code. And and at the end, we'll talk that, okay, how much performance improvement you might get through this. So let's start with the classes of parallelism. So in from the software perspective, whatever parallelism we write, whether it's a thread, task, this can be grouped into two broad categories. One is a data level parallelism and another is task level parallelism. So what is data level parallelism? You have multiple elements and you can operate on that data elements individually because they are not dependent on each other. Whereas task level parallelism is you have a complete work to be done. And now what you can do, you can divide the complete work in a multiple tasks and schedule them tasks independently. There might be some synchronization needed between these tasks. So let's see a very simple example here. If you can see, it's a data level parallelism. We are just operating on two arrays and adding them element by element. Whereas in the task level parallelism, I'm using here threads. So there is a particular work I want to achieve, and I'm just scheduling the task. And at the end, once the tasks are done, we are joining that. So this is like a classic example. So what kinds of parallelism are available in hardware? So there are different parallelism which is available in hardware. First one is the instruction level parallelism. So what CPU architects does, they write a logic in a computer such a way that the multiple instruction can run in a parallel fashion. So when I say parallel, it's not like exactly at the same time. It's not a concurrent. So parallelly, it might be in pipeline fashion, interlude or something like that. So instruction level parallelism is achieved by using something called as out of order execution, where if there are some instructions which are waiting for, let's say some data to be fetched from hardware and from memory, and there are other instructions which are arithmetic instructions which can be scheduled on any arithmetic units, then basically CPU can interleave these instructions or reorder the instructions. This is one way to achieve the instruction level parallelism. Another way is called as a branch prediction. So for example, if a particular branch occurs now, let's say if statement occurs, then we know all classic pipeline, right? Fetch, decode, and then we execute the instruction. But we'll not able to know that at that point of time, because fetch is happening very early, that whether the branch will be taken or it will not be taken. It will go to some another, it will take as a jump or not. So at that time, there are some branch predictors available which can have some statistics, and based on that, it can take a branch. And once the result is available, if the prediction is correct, then you don't get any performance problems. But if there is a mismatch in a prediction, you get a problems. And nowadays, hardware have a branch predictor which can pretty well work, like more than 95 to 98% time, you will get the correct prediction. Then another set of architecture is this vector architectures and graphics image. So vector architectures implements all this instruction level parallelism using something called as SIMD. So SIMD is nothing but single instruction, multiple data. Whereas graphics processor, you need to run multiple threads which are running completely in a sync. They also utilizes a SIMD kind of environment. So what we are going to talk today is about more on vector architectures. We are not going to talk about graphic processor units. Another one is thread level parallelism. You can have individual CPU cores can have multiple threads, and your software threads can get scheduled on these hardware threads. So then we know that in a single computer we can have multiple processors, and nowadays we are having the clusters of computers also, like a multi-computer where you schedule your task in a distributed manner. So let's take an example of a very simple loop called as XY loop. The name is like a single precision AX plus BY. We are not using any floats here, so you can ignore single precision, but yeah, it's still AX plus BY loop. So what we are trying to do here is there are two arrays X and Y, and to the first array, to every element we are multiplying with some scalar value. Scalar value, I mean to say individual value. And then we are adding this, right? So if I run this program in a Godbolt and see what kind of assembly compiler produces for me, so this is somewhat I will get with a particular options of a compiler. So here you can see, so focus on this L3 section. There, this first instruction is move instruction, where it is copying the A value into the particular register. Then is doing multiplication with the X, then it is adding into Y, then once again storing it into a particular memory, and then incrementing a loop. So it's like, this is called as a scalar version. So you are operating on a single data elements here. Okay. So for example, now if I have to explain this, the way it's like a single operations are getting done. So X0, X1, X2, X3, X4. But if you say there is no dependency between X0 and X1, so can hardware provide some mechanism, some more execution units, some register length which is bigger, where we can fit more number of elements, and all these elements can get operated simultaneously. The other problem here is, if you see for every iteration from the hardware point of view, there is a single operation, let's say, right? Let's say multiplication is single operation now. But for every element, the CPU has to fetch the instruction, decode the instruction. So this is a overhead. Can we do something better, that we encode this information in a single instruction and tell to hardware that, okay, let's say these are 4 elements which you can go and multiply. These are the next set of 4 elements. So for these 4 elements, the fetch of will happen once only, the instruction fetch I am talking about. And the interpretation of the instruction, that whether it's a multiplication or addition, will also happen once. So that is a performance benefit we get from it. So let's say a SIMD version, how it can look. So let's say there is this C version, however it is, but somehow compiler produce some optimized code, and now it can tell CPU that, okay, whatever these 2 consecutive elements are there, you do operation at the same time. Okay, but if you have architecture which can support more number of elements, that also can be done. For example, you can have 4 as well. So there is no some constant like the 2 4. It depends on architecture to architecture. Some architecture support 8 elements, some support 16 elements. Some might also even support 64 elements up to that thing. So let's see a simple block diagram of CPU core with the SIMD architecture. So what it additionally adds is so in general scalar architecture, you will have ALUs, FPUs. You will also have this instruction fetch and decode logic. And then there are this scalar register. So scalar register is like, for example, in Intel, individual register size is 64-bit, right? And ARM also, I think general in nowadays it is 64-bit only. In older days, we might have studied in computer architecture, that register sizes was varying from 16, 32, then new era came where it is a 64-bit. But now there is this additional memory, SIMD vector register. And if you can see here, I have shown it in a big space as compared to scalar register. So this in the modern computers, a single register can have a width up to 2048. So ARM particular versions of extension support up to 2048. But I'm saying up to, it can implement, when it tries to implement, it can implement lesser than that, but it will be more than 128, 256, 512, something like that. Similarly, Intel has this AVX 512 extensions where the individual register length is 512 bits. And there are not a single register. So on ARM, it's like 30, more than 30 registers are there with this same length, if that extension is enabled. And similarly on Intel side also, the same thing. Same story goes on AMD or NVIDIA things. So when you have such a register who is very wide enough, and then you want to do some arithmetic on that. So it's not like, you will have a single data element which is of 2048 and you will operate on that. But these are designed to contain more than one number of elements. So a particular instruction when issued, CPU can interpret that instruction and say that, okay, this instruction says that, okay, whatever this register is there, interpret it's like 16 8-bit characters, assuming that, for example, we have a vector length or the register length up to 128 bits. Or a particular instruction can say, okay, it is a 8 16-bit shorts or 4 32-bit ints or 4 32-bit floors. Similarly, right? And nowadays we have a data type which is of like 64-bit, a single data type. So you can say, okay, 2 64-bit doubles. So if the memory size goes like 128 to 256, these numbers can automatically increase. Okay. Any question? So I see some questions in Q&A. Let me just see. Is SIMD similar to multiprocessing or multi-threading in Python? Not exactly. So multi-threading and multiprocessing are more on a software kind of concept, whereas SIMD is a hardware kind of concept. So what happens when you're, let's say, writing some program and there are some instructions. So an individual operation will get converted into individual instructions. Now, whether a compiler decides to put this combines a number of similar operations into a single instruction, or whether it emits a single instruction, it depends on the compiler. But the facility is already available with the hardware. Okay, but how the operation of taking or computing precedence on an operator take place? Like example, we use X is a pointer. So how does this result? So it's very simple. Basically, when the compiler tries to go through this, it's know that, okay, X into I, this X, the pointer is an array, right? So it is trying to access a particular memory. And then when you are looping from that memory, you are having the array. That means a continuous memory. So it can load the continuous chunk of memory into the your hardware. And when this A is there, so if it has to multiply it at the same time, what hardware can do, it can replicate this A into another register as an individual element and say, okay, now multiply these two register element by element. So does that answer questions, Weber? Okay. Does OpenMP uses SIMD? Not OpenMP uses a multi-threading model, but there are pragmas available where it says that, okay, you don't use a threading model, but use a SIMD kind of thing. So the pragma is, I think, hash pragma OpenMP SIMD. So it directs compilers so that, okay, this code can be this vector or the loop can be vectorized. How many processor follow SIMD till now? I think most of the processor have a SIMD architecture. All the modern processors, it's very old concepts, nothing new concept. But nowadays, I will not assume even whatever the mobiles you have that will have only a scalar implementation will not have a SIMD implementation. So most of them will have. So in the interest of time, we'll go ahead, and if there are some questions, we'll take it. Okay. So everyone knows about this multi-threading or multi-core thing. Then what is the advantages of SIMD over multi-thread or multi-core? So the first advantage is the energy efficiency. Why it is energy efficient? If you see it from a hardware point of view, then if you are running on a single core, then less area of silicon is active, so that you consume a less energy. Another one is zero scheduling overhead. You don't have to schedule the way you schedule a thread. So there is some overhead, even though let's say there are some implementation which optimizes that, but still there is some additional overhead. No synchronization required at the end of the loop. So we saw in the task level parallelism, at the end of work, we needed a synchronization when we are using a multi-threading. Similarly, let's say you are writing a loop and there is a lot number of elements are there, and then you divide that elements, like say 2048 elements are there, you divide like 5112 elements on each thread for a processing. But at the end, what you have to do, you have to synchronize all the things before, just after exiting the loop. So next topic is how a day-to-day programmer can take advantages of SIMD. So we'll see there are 4 approaches, like assembly, SIMD intrinsic functions. Then one is explicit vectorization libraries, also called as wrapper classes. And then we'll talk about auto vectorization. So the first thing is hardware are providing instruction sets which can have these instructions. And now you are writing a code, or you are writing your algorithm. So what you can do, you can say, okay, I know everything about hardware, I know about everything about SIMD, and let me write the code in assembly. So this is most crude way, I will say, because understanding assembly, understanding a particular instruction set architecture, understanding that complete architecture of processor requires a lot of effort and time. Also, it decreases the readability. You can't express things in very abstract levels the way C or C++ allows you. What advantages you get here is whatever you are requesting, you will get that thing, right? But if you write code in C and C++, it's not in your control. So you have a complete control. Disadvantages is no source code level portability. So for example, today you are running on i7 machine, which has some particular extension available, and you are writing your code for that. For example, AVX512. You might not sure that whether another CPU you are using, whether it has that same extension or not. So you lose the source code level portability. One which I told about is like needs familiarity with the instruction set. So you can see a very simple example where I'm doing this operation of adding element-wise addition of 2 arrays here. I'm doing it for 102 elements. I have hard-coded the value. So if you see for 100 elements, I have to write a separate code, and for remaining 2 elements, I have to write separate code. Because here the vector length is 16 bytes. Here is 16 bytes. So 100 elements were not, 102 elements are not divisible by 16 bytes, which basically are 408. So only 400 bytes are divisible. So we write for 100 element, then you have to think about a remainder loop as well. So if you change this loop like 103 or 104, you have to change the logic. It's not that flexible. Okay, any question up to this point? Okay, so I'm looking into the Q&A section.
I think there is no more questions.
Yeah. So next thing is a SIMD intrinsics. So what are the intrinsics? So intrinsics are some functions which are provided by compilers plus the vendor. So basically vendor writes some code upstreams into compiler, and that intrinsics are a pseudo function call. Why it is a pseudo function call? Because when you write that operation there, actual function call will not happen, but that function call will get replaced with a particular instructions of a particular architecture. So as you can see, this is very tightly coupled with a particular architecture, because each and every architecture will have its own CMD intrinsic functions available, right? What advantage you get here is it's just better than writing code in assembly. More readability you can get it from there. Disadvantages is limited portability, as intrinsics are specific to instruction set. User has to explicitly specify which SIMD operation he or she wants to do. So you need to have some understanding about SIMD architecture. Here compiler has to perform some additional operator, for example, operation, for example, some register allocation and that. But again, that is not that major disadvantage. But the major disadvantages are these two. This is it tied to instruction set. So for example, this is an example I came up for the same example which I saw. So this is written for SSE2 extension of Intel. So here the vector length is 128 bits, which I have taken, and then you can see here I have to explicitly specify what operations I am doing. The another disadvantage is it doesn't have overloads, because all these are not a C++, it's kind of more a C level of thing. So it will have some operations where, for example, you will have add, EPI 32, EPI 64, EPI 128, and from the name of a function you have to understand, okay, what operations it is doing. And you also explicitly has to again worry about the remainder loop in this case. Again, this is not portable at source code level, because this will work on SSE2. You are porting on ARM architecture. Okay, this will not work. Then there is a lot of efforts going on to unify all these things. So how can these things can be unified? So people are writing a wrapper classes or explicit vectorization library on top of this intrinsics. So what happens? They write some operations which are like supported by most of the architecture, and in that functions call per respective function call, if you are compiling a code for, let's say, ARM architecture, let's say Intel architecture, they call a specific intrinsics there. So it's more like based on macro and other details. Compiler knows that, okay, on which architecture this code is getting compiled. Advantages: perfect for platform portability, because nowadays a single vectorization library supports a lot of different extensions. So if you just go from one level of one architecture to another architecture, your code will still compile and you will not have a problem. The problem here is it is source code level portability is there, but not a performance level portability. Why? Because a particular architecture might be implementing 512 bits of vector length, whereas another might be implementing 128 bit of vector length. So not that good thing. Also, once again, it is here also you have to care about explicit operations of SIMD, and you again require understanding of a SIMD model. So there is a effort going in C++ to standardize these things, because there are a lot of such libraries available. So there is one proposal which is going on, and you can experiment with this proposal. That is STD experimental SIMD. This only provides a data type. There is another proposal also which provides algorithms to work on the SIMDs. So if I have to write the code using STD experimental SIMD, you can see the first scalar product function, where I am just using the inner product, STD inner product here, and I'm using a vector of floats. But in the next for loop or the next function, which is scalar product using SIMD, I am using vector of SIMD float, and SIMD float is nothing but native SIMD of float, so templatized library. So you can go on Godbolt and experiment with this. When I will share the slides, there will be links available where you can play with these examples as well. So this only provides a data type. There is another library called as XSIMD, which provides operations as well. So here, if you can see, it's not that simple code, right? So here you need to take care of alignment, you need to take care about a particular operations, and you have to also calculate remainder loop. Yes, wrapper classes provide you some options where you can get a vector length and then you can divide, get a remainder, and do some magic here. So that is still possible. So any questions? Let me check. Okay. What options do we need to give to the compiler to provide SIMD instructions? We'll cover this in auto vectorization. For the Intel architecture, the most area of available SIMD instruction is, yes, there is also link available for ARM. Will STL algo also support processing of SIMD data types? Yes, it supports. And just to add on that, even though if you use current STL algorithms without passing any extra parameter, with O3 optimization. So for example, algorithms like accumulate, algorithms like transform, copy, fill, this still can be vectorized. If we get a time, I can show that also. Or you can just go on to Godbolt, write a simple transform, use a simple algorithm like a transform and compile it with using the O3. And you will be able to see there that how it is doing a vectorization. So these are some explicit vectorization libraries or wrapper classes. So these are not extensive set of libraries, but these are some of which when I was reading through this material, I came around. And the first three, which I have marked as a red star, they are available in Compiler Explorer. So you can just go there and play with these libraries as well. Now coming to next thing. So now let's say if you really want to get a performance, a very high performance, then you will follow whatever steps we have mentioned up to now. Might be you write assembly, you will might use intrinsics, or you might use the explicit vectorization libraries. But not everyone wants to spend that time, or might be it's not worth to spend to get a performance for a particular application. So is there any options which is available that, okay, which is, I don't have to do anything. I will write my code in C or C++ the way I used to write it usually, and pass some options to compiler and then let compiler figure out which instruction it needs to emit. So that concept is nothing but auto vectorization, where compiler analyzes the code. It tries to find out what is the cost model for it, that whether doing it with a vectorized code, what is the performance, what doing with the scalar, what is the performance, whether the correctness is there or not, because it's not right that you are writing some loop and if there is overlapping, and if you use that with a SIMD instruction, then your result will be incorrect. We'll see that example as well. So all these things compiler has to figure out in a backend. So a lot of research goes in this area, and then compiler, if it try it as it able to prove that the correctness is still taken care and the performance will be much higher, then it emits the particular vector instructions. So what thing you get here is you get a source code level portability. You basically write a code and you rely on the compiler, but it doesn't guarantee a performance stability. So again, when I'm saying here performance stability, it is not even switching from one computer to another computer. So when vectorization is happening, it analyzes a loop, and there are a lot of things it has to check inside a loop. So for example, now you are developing a brick project and there is a loop which is very intensive, arithmetically very intensive. So their compiler has done a nice auto vectorization, and you're super duper happy. Your code is running very fast, and then someday you got some bug or a new feature, due to which in that particular for loop you have to add a bunch of some simple switch statements or some if and else statements, and then compiler will not be able to vectorize it. And so when compiler will not able to vectorize it for that particular loop, you might hit a performance problem up to like less 8x the problem you can hit, and then your client can complain that the last version was running good and this version is not running good. So this kind of problem can happen, but in real world this happens in a very less time, because a single loop doesn't dictate the performance like 8x or 10x times. in most of the general cases. So still you are safer, but okay, theoretically this is possible. Any question up to this points? So let me check. In C++, OpenCV are the image processing algos optimized with SIMD? Yes, all these OpenCV algorithms are optimized with the SIMD. So all multimedia algorithms or image processing algorithms, they extensively use SIMD. How is auto-vectorization different from optimization? So you can say optimization is a bigger umbrella, whereas auto-vectorization is a specific concept. For example, doing inlining is a kind of optimization. Unrolling a loop is a kind of optimization. Constant folding is a kind of optimization. So similarly, auto-vectorization is a kind of optimization. Oh, sorry. So now here you can see I have written this code again. Here I have hard coded the value, but don't worry, we'll talk about cases where we don't know the loop count as well. And I have passed some options to compiler, and then I was able to get some vectorized code. So in this vectorized code, it first tries to check if there is an overlap. Let's say if there is an overlap, that this A and B arrays are overlapping such a way that in the first iteration A is writing something and that is getting read in the second loop through the B, then there will not be a correctness, right? Because in scalar model it will work perfectly fine, but in vector model it will not. So it just checks for overlap in the first case. If it doesn't found any overlap, then it tries to use the instructions which are available. And here this is another example where 32 byte was used to do the vectorization. So the vector length was a 32 byte. And if it finds overlap, then it just goes with the normal SISD. SISD means our scalar model. So this is how the loop will get generated. Again, this example is available on Godboard. So I have one question. By overlap, somewhere I saw in a pop-up, do I mean a loop carrier dependency? So not loop carrier dependency. When I say overlap, it is a pointer aliasing. For example, A and B are actually pointing to some memory location starting with different offsets, right? So that possibility is there. So for example, there is this A of 0 is getting written here, and it is getting written at B of 1. And now in the next instruction, when you are doing in scalar model, we'll read B of n as a separate value. But when you are using in a vector model, we will read B of 0, B of 1, B of 2, B of 3, V1 before having the result of A of 0 available, right? So it's a pointer aliasing basically. So up to this point, we were talking about something called as loop optimizations, but there is another kind of vectorization which is also possible nowadays, which is called as SLP vectorization, superword level parallelism. What it basically does is combines similar independent instructions into a vector instruction. It might not be a loop kind of thing. So it can vectorize memory accesses, arithmetic operations, comparison operations, and a lot of other things. So this is a very toy example here. For example, you don't have a loop here, but you are doing something A0, A1, A2, A3, and there are these elements. You are combining A1, B1, A2, B2, A1, B1, A2, B2. So now all these even operations will also get properly vectorized. So compiler does a lot of things here to make sure that it is guaranteeing the correctness. Correctness is the most important on a performance also. So it tries to find out whether there is a problem here. If it doesn't, then it just vectorize the code. And here you can see there is no individual things are happening, right? Everything is happening at the same place. Okay. Okay, so before going to the next session, any questions up to this point? Since SIMD deals with the hardware, how is resources allocation done in processes by the OS? OS doesn't have to play any role here. There is no role. So basically, whatever binary you will be generating, that binary will have a particular instruction, which is a special kind of instruction which is understood by hardware. So OS doesn't have to do anything here. So this SIMD works with the bare metal as well, where there is no OS, no operating system, because there is no support required from a software point of view. What compile flags did you pass to ensure return? Yes, we are coming to that. Which compile flags? So if we talk from the GCC perspective, I have taken two studies here, GCC and Clang. So with the GCC, the active vectorization is by default enabled with the O3. If you pass O3, it will enable vectorization. Let's say if you want to still enable it at O2 level, you can explicitly enable using F3 vectorize. So there are some bunch of operations or the options are available which you can pass to compiler to get information that, okay, whether a particular loop was vectorized, if it was vectorized, what vector length it used, if it was not vectorized, why it was not vectorized. So if you get that analysis, then you might be able to rewrite some code, and we'll see this. The one interesting option is MARC, which is nothing but a machine architecture. So basically, when GCC and Clang tries to produce some vectorized code, what they generally favor is that if you are running on Intel, a compiler knows that, okay, all the Intel processor, which are modern day processor, supports this particular basic SIMD instructions, let's say SSE. And then it emits code for the SSE. But let's say now you have a higher, your processor is supporting some higher version, then you can explicitly pass that particular architecture details here, and then compiler can emit a better result. The best thing what you can do, if you know that whatever code you are compiling will run on the same machine, just simply blindly pass -mark is equal to native. So compiler will figure out what sets of extensions are supported, and then it runs. So mark native is very good. Here you don't get any binary level portability. On the same machine you have to execute the code. Similar thing is available with the Clang and LLVM, but here it is by default enabled at O2 level itself. And then you can have analysis. So I talked about it. There are two types of vectorization possible. One is loop and SLP. So you can enable the analysis on a loop vectorization or SLP vectorization independently. You can say what are the for loops or while loops which got converted to a vectorized code, or you can also look into which are the missed things, and it nicely gives results with some warnings and some more information. Once again, the MARC option is still available in the Clang and LLVM. Once again, why I'm saying it's a Clang and LLVM, because Clang has really very minimum role to play here, as if you know Clang is just a front end for parsing C and C++ code, but most of the thing is taken care by LLVM in the backend. So Clang also provides some additional options if you really want to play. So that options are like, you can force a vector width. You can force interleaving. So what is interleaving? For example, now you have vector length of 8. So when you are trying to load 8 elements, so when I'm saying 8, it's like 8 elements, let's say, trying to load 8 elements, it will take us some time. So in that same time, what you want to do, instead of going for operation on that element, you say, okay, request for next 8 element, request for next 8 element. So this is interleaving. So these 3 operations are there. And then after those 3, you will do addition or multiplication which is required, and then you will store these 3 vectors. That this kind of interleaving can also be done. And compiler actually, based on whatever microarchitecture is there, or the architecture details are available, the information, it can figure out what need to be vectorized with and what can be an interleaved count. But if you really want to force it, you are sure, then you can force it. Why it is useful? The problem, what happens is compiler internally uses something called as a cost model. And cost model basically most of the time favors code where it doesn't go for aggressive optimization. It says, okay, up to this point I was able to do optimization, and for the next case, if I try to do optimization, I'm not sure whether it will work or not. So in such cases, it doesn't do. But if you are sure on your code, then you can force some things. like this. This is really useful when you have some operations like gather and scatters. What are gather and scatter options? Basically, you are not loading from a particular contiguous memory, but you are loading, let's say, from index 0, then 10th, 20th, 30th, 40th. So this is like a gathering from a different locations. And scattering is basically storing at different locations. Here compiler tries to do some cost modeling, and it tries to figure out whether it is really efficient to vectorize or not. But if you want to force, you can force with the different vector widths so that cost model get adjusted internally. Any question up to this point? If I enable vectorization, and how do I confirm whether it is enabled or not? We'll come to that. Can I confirm by checking processor uses using top command? No. Could you talk about data layouts, SOA and EOS needed for vectorization? Yes, please remember me at the end of the session. We'll have a little details about whether SOA is suitable or EOS is suitable for vectorization. So in a modern compilers, what types of loop can be vectorized? So this is I have taken from LLVM, but same set of operations is still possible with the Clang or still possible with MSVC. So first with the loops with unknown trip count. Trip count means loop count. You don't know the exact loop count. Still the vectorization is possible. Compiler can do it. Runtime check of pointers, whether the overlapping is there or not. You saw the example. Reductions. So basically reductions means you're summing of all the elements of a vector. So you are still having a loop carry dependency here. If you see, you are using sum is equal to sum plus the next one. But compiler knows that, okay, it analyzes it, it knows that, okay, this is not actually loop carry dependency, but it is a reduction operation. So there are set of instructions which are available in a hardware to explicitly do the reductions. Induction is basically you have the loop variable and you just want to assign it to a particular individual elements in array. If there are very simple if statements, compiler can flatten that if statement using something called as masking, which vector architecture supports. We'll not talk about more on that, but masking is very simple. That let's say you have 128 elements in a vector, but from that 120 element you want to just process odd elements, right? So you can disable the even elements. This is a very simple example. You can do a lot of permutation combination there. Pointer induction variables. So you can work with pointer as well as integer numbers as well. It's not a problem for. You can work with the reverse iterators and iterators which are available with the standard algorithms, scatter and gather. It can also work with the vectorization mixed types like bool and integers. It can also do global structure analysis. For example, if compiler can see, okay, what is the layout of a structure, from that it can try to figure out whether it can be vectorized or not. Vectorization of function calls, if there are some function whose definition is already available, or there are functions which are basically intrinsics like math function, cos, sine, all this can also be vectorized. Partial unrolling during vectorization, this is also supported, like you have vector which is running for a very long thing. So what you can do, if let's say 2048 is a iteration count, so you can unroll it for a 2 count and the number of loop will become 1024 and you do on vectorization on that. So the number of loop will still become very less. The last one is very interesting, epilogue vectorization. So what is epilogue vectorization? So for example, now you have very high number, n number of instructions or loop count which you want to optimize. Now compiler, let's say have, or the architecture particular can support 128 elements at one same time. So how you can able to vectorize? You will be able to vectorize multiples of 128. So let's say you have some trip count which is equal to 120, which is multiplied by 128 plus 127. So at the end you will be doing 120. The CPU will be doing 127 scalar operations, which is still very large mighty. So what this epilogue vectorization does is it basically first vectorizes with the highest vector length, then it goes to some lower vector length, then again does, again goes to a lower vector length, again does. So it emits a code such a way that if, let's say, 127 elements are remaining now, then there will be instruction to check, okay, now it is less than 128, so can't vectorize, go to that current loop. So it'll go to another loop where the vectorization is performed, let's say, with 64 elements. Then it will still, number of elements are remaining, it can go with the 32. So it adjusts the cost model so that you get a better performance. Okay, things that hurts. So while doing auto vectorization, these are some things which can very badly affect. One is a possible aliasing, because compiler, might not be able to figure out whether there is overlap of X and Y. So compiler has to emit the instructions. Unknown alignment. So if you are loading, let's say, 16 or let's say 16 bytes of memory at the same time, then architecture works very well when that memory is aligned to 16 byte. So basically the address is multiple of 16 byte. If it is unaligned, then it has to do for 2 loads. So their performance, it can be a problem. Upq function calls, basically you don't know what the function is doing, you don't have any idea, so it can't vectorize it because it can have a side effect. Significant control divergence, specifically using break or continue. If you have a lot of multiple conditions in a for loop which is doing break and continue, still not be able to vectorize. And we talked about gathers and scatters, that it tries to find out whether it is profitable or not. So a lot of theory we have seen now. We'll see some live example, 2-3 live examples, and I will show that how the analysis is done on the Godboard. So meanwhile, let me talk about some questions. What is the advantage of partial loop unrolling for a vectorization in the previous slide? So when you do unrolling of loop, you don't encounter branch conditions, and when you don't encounter a branch condition, you might not have to stall the operations, right? So branch is really not good for CPU architecture. CPU architectures are really good for if everything goes in sequential and parallel flow. If flow breaks, then you have to invalidate a lot of registers, you have to invalidate caches, you have to invalidate pipeline, and then you get a performance problem. The other advantage here with partial loop unrolling is register allocation. So when you unroll the loop, in the first set, you can use a different register. In the second set, you can use a different register. And the same time, you can use the interleaving of the operations as well. So because number of registers available with you are like 30 or 32. So that advantage, you can get it from here. So let me just stop sharing and share another screen. Okay. Hope you are able to see Godboard, Compiler Explorer.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then let's have some analysis. So I have organized the compiler on the first compiler is x64, x86-64 GCC trunk. The options which I am passing is O3, and there are some options I have passed here for analysis purpose. On the another side, I have Clang compiler, again the trunk version. You can play here with O2 as well and see the vectorization is actually happening with O2 as well. We'll see that as well. And we have passed some flags for analysis purpose. So let me copy our first example. Okay. Sorry for the naming conventions if you find it a little bit weird. So if you can see, is font visible?
You should increase it 1 or 2 sizes.
It is visible, yeah, but better to increase actually.
Okay, let me try. Oops, I'm not able to increase somehow. Somehow compiler is not supporting for me.
Maybe you can
There
just zoom your browser.
yeah,
Control plus.
Control plus.
Yeah. Okay, hope it is
much
better. So if you see this multiply scalar instruction is there, and then you have it's a very simple loop which we are talking about. Let's go to the analysis section here below before going to what instruction is generated. So the analysis what we are using, it is saying that okay, loop vectorite using 16-byte vectors. Then loop version for vectorization because of possible aliasing. Loop version means it has emitted a scalar version as well, because there might be a possible aliasing. And then vectorize one loops in a function, and what kind of analysis it is done, I really don't have the details understanding about what are these different algorithms. And here also you can, on the Clang side also you can see vectorization width and interleave count, which is reported here. Now let's see what instruction is generated here. So forget about this. This is just checking for some whether there is a possible aliasing overlapping, and if it is not, then it executes this here. So if you see here, we are loading multiple things in XM 0, 2, 1, and 3, and then we are doing the multiplication. We are doing like x1 and 3, 0 and 2. So a lot of things are doing. So this is all vector operations. And here I'm adding 16. So basically I'm incrementing by 16 elements, right? Not 16 elements, by 16 bytes. So next address will be to load will be 16 bytes, because this RAX is used as a index here. If you don't know a lot of assembly, don't worry. You don't have to know about each and individual instruction. You can just find out, okay, what it is doing. It is adding 16, possibly some 16 bytes addition in the address, and you can just check, okay, RAX is getting used here as an index. What is the scalar version? So scalar version is down here. See here, and now RAX is 1 here. So individual operation is getting performed. Move means kind of a load operation here, and then it is a multiply operation, and once again a store operation, a single operation. So if you get some overlapping problem, then you will face this will basically jump here in the L3 L6 section. So you should say somewhere jump to L6 or L3. From L3 it jumps to L6. Now we know that, okay, when we are working, I know this A and B, they are not overlapping. As a software developer, I have a guarantee, because that's why I want to do. So if you might have seen some examples or the actual signature of string copy and that functions, there you might notice some special words like a restrict kind of thing. And standard says that if you are copying from same memory location which are overlapping, then operation is not correctly defined. So there is something called as restricted pointers. And what restricted pointer says that, okay, it's very simple definition, that in this section, whenever I am using A is the only one, or the expression derived from A is the only expression which will be using to access the memory which is allocated by A. So there will not be any other variable. So even though B is present there, there is no way that B will get overlap. And if you see here, this is a very small code now. Now you don't have overlapping things to check here. It is just now checking for whether n you can vectorize with a particular number. If not, then go for a scalar, because let's say n is only 3 or 2 elements, or n is 0 or not. That's what it is checking. Otherwise, here is a vectorized loop. And here you can see now that warning is no longer here, that loop version is generated. Right? Any question up to this point? So if you say this was using 16-byte vectors, and now let's say I don't know what is the architecture here, right? So let me just use the architecture as a native and see what happens. See, as soon as I use a native here, then I was able to get a vector length which is very higher, 32-byte vector and 16-byte vector. Yeah, Janki Raman, you have some question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So does the loop has to be the same, just be a sequential loop? Can it be more like used for image processing? Let's say I have X and Y, and I go use X to I load elements sequentially. but the loop may not be in the same. Let's say if you have two nested kind of loops.
Mahendra, are you able
Right?
to follow?
No, I'm not able to hear it properly.
Jankiram, sorry, the audio is not clear. Can you say again?
1 minute. Okay, so here there is only one loop, I. Let's say I have two loops, I and j, and every time, like typically using image processing or when you have two loops, you have an I, and then when you come to j, you will be loading the elements in sequential order only, but still your I will change j, something like that. So I'm just asking for auto vectorization. Will the compiler be able to identify such kinds of loop and then parameterize and follow them?
Yes. So most of the time, even if you have some nested vector, so if I understood your question, so you have some nested loops here, right? So in nested loop also, yeah, compiler does a lot of optimization, and you can actually try it. Most of the time, it tries to vectorize it. But if it doesn't, let's say it's not able to vectorize, and you know this need to be vectorized, you can use pragma like hash pragma clang vectorize with this particular vector length. So you're explicitly telling the compiler. There is another pragma which is available, hash pragma openmp simd, where you tell that okay, openmp it doesn't use the openmp simd doesn't use the threading model. It says to compiler that okay, this vector I'm explicitly asking you to vectorize. So these things are also possible.
Okay. So does it also have to, does the compiler has to know that this memory that we are accessing is in a sequential order? Let's say here you use I equals 0 and then I is implemented till n. So from the loop I can see that okay, it's going to be accessed in a sequential order, 32 bits, or something. Let's say I'm using some other implemented operator, and, but the memory is indeed accessed in a sequential order.
So the bottom line here is compiler needs to know a lot of information. Even let's say if you are hiding implementation from the compiler, let's say you are doing some magic and then still it is sequential, compiler doesn't know. And all these things are happening at compile time. So the bottom line here is as much as information compiler knows, it can do a lot of optimization. If it doesn't know anything, we'll talk about next version where it doesn't know about something and then how compiler behaves. Okay. Yeah. Here instead of starting it from 0, you can start it from some arbitrary number and increment I with some constant as well. So okay, so this is a first example which we saw here, and then when I used a native, I was able to get a code which was vectorized with 32-bit vectors, and then I was talking about the epilogue thing, right? Then it generated another set of instructions which was there, which is basically vectorized using a 16-byte vector. So it tries to do a vectorization with the 32-byte if it has a sufficient number of elements available. If it doesn't, then it goes to 16. If it doesn't, then it goes to scalar version. Here you see on a Clang side, I haven't still provided the vectorization or the architecture information. So still it is using a vectorization width as a 4. So let me just specify here as a native. You can specify it's like a AVX 5112, AVX Skylake 5112. So when you provide some option, you will check whether that option is correct or not. For ARM, it is same thing like ARM v8.86 plus Neon or SV2. So this is one example which we saw. Let's go to another example.
Mahendra, before you move ahead, there is one question related to restrict which you talked about. So I want you to repeat that.
Could you repeat about overlapping tolerance? Sorry, I didn't understand it correct. Okay. So let me try to tell this, and if not, then we will try. For example, you have these elements A0, A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. And now somehow this A0 element gets overlapped with the B1 element. Now when you are doing a calculation, what you are doing, you are reading A0, you are reading A0, you are reading B0 and writing into A0. So when you have overlapping problem, it means it is getting written in a B1 as well. So in next loop, when you increment the loop count, through B1, it will get read. But if we use, so if this is the problem, or if this is the case, then vectorization doesn't work here, because it can't write the value, it can't write the A0 there, right? Before reading the B1. So it will write A0, A1, A2 at the same time. So this is a problem. So this code, no one can vectorize, not even compile. You cannot even manually vectorize this code because this code is not vectorizable. So to check whether this problem is there, so whatever is for the complete vector length, it for that complete vector length, it tries to find out. So let me just try to remove this restriction and see if we get some number here to check. Probably we should get somewhere. So basically this 24, 6 and 3, it totally belongs, it calculates for 32 somehow, and then it checks whether there is a overlapping of 32 in any one of them. So that's what you can refer on more on a restricted pointer. This is a C99 thing someone pointed in the chat, but it is not a standard C++, but compiler uses it heavily.
So I guess the problem is that A and B might be sub-arrays of each other, and then when you write to one before you read, because then you cannot vectorize each other because you are using 4 like multiple at once.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, we'll go to our next example. If you have question, you can connect with me on Discord, and then we can have a long discussion there. So let's talk about this example now. So here, if you see, there is a function, very simple function, get size. It's a global function, and now compiler doesn't know what is happening in get size. So when the loop is getting executed, it doesn't know whether the get size, when it calls get size here, right, I is less than get size, whether the size is increased or not, right? It can't figure it out. So it says, okay, miss, couldn't vectorize a loop. Very simple example. And we might encounter it day-to-day basis. But if let's say you are writing some code, something like this as a member class, and if you just put const there, then okay, it might not return something different. So that is one thing. But another thing, what you can do is simply, instead of writing I is less than get size, what I can do, I can initialize another variable here, size, and once in the start only, I take a size here. If I take a size here and just say size, oh, it works. See? Very simple. So this is one example which I wanted to share. Let me share a last example, and then we'll talk a little bit about array of structure and structure of arrays, and then we'll close. By the way, this will not happen with the standard vector dot size, because the compiler knows what is happening inside that size thing, and it also knows that, okay, this is a const function and you are using vector here once only. So it knows a lot of details there, so it will be able to do the vectorization. Now if you here see it once again, it says, okay, couldn't vectorize loop, and it also tries to provide some information here that why it's not able to do the vectorization, because control flows in a loop. So there are a lot of control flows, not a single one. So this is again a toy example, but just I wanted to tell you, even if you see this example, it is really simple. Every time I am doing a sequential operations with I only, but whatever offset I am adding is different. But once I get into a function call, that offset is fixed actually, because that offset is based on x and x is passed here. So compiler should have been able to figure it out, but somehow compiler doesn't. So you can rewrite this code. How you can rewrite this code? You can just take switch out of a for loop, right? And then compute a offset and then write another for loop. So for example, let me copy the code instead of typing it. So you can see the difference in the two loops here. So if you see in this case, when I'm passing here x, I'm computing offset itself and then using it inside a loop. Now once it is getting inside a loop, then what compiler knows that there is an instruction which is available, instruction called as a broadcast instruction, which will broadcast this x element into all the elements of a particular vector. And then this will become kind of a vector addition, right? So this compiler is able to do. And see, if you see here, the first on the line number and 20, it was saying that couldn't vectorize loop, but here below on line number 33 or something, it is saying that, okay, loop vectorize using 32 byte vectors. So this is a very simple example you can think of. So yeah, that's it. The last point coming to array of structures and structure of arrays. So if you say array of structures, then in that case, it actually depends on a cost model. So if you have array of structure, then and you have elements inside that structure, then no two elements are consecutive, right? First ex element is there from the first array, from first structure, and then there will be another some members of the first object, and then you will have a member of the second object. So in this case, there might be a problem while performing the auto vectorization, because it sees this as a gather and scatter operations. So based on a cost model, it might do or it might not do. So I was trying this thing with consecutive 5 doubles in a particular structure, but it was still able to do. But once I went to 6, it was not able to do. But when I forced, okay, do a vectorization, it was still able to do. So again, it depends on compiler to compiler and what options you are passing. But when you have an array, structure of arrays, then each element is consecutive in a particular array, and you are doing operation, compiler can do a global structure analysis and find out, okay, this still can be vectorized, and it vectorizes it nicely. The key thing here to remember is don't hide a lot of details from a compiler. If you hide a lot of details from compiler will not able to find out to perform a lot of optimization. It's not just about vector optimization, constant folding, inlining, loop unrolling, and there are tons of these things are there. So if you can provide some more information to compiler at compile time, it's better. Yes, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Janki Raman has raised his hand.
It was raised, I think, earlier itself. I'm not wrong.
That was superb. Thank you very much, Mahendra. Any last questions before we all go away and fill the feedback forms?
One last question. This is my take on from this session. Correct me if I am wrong. So this is something auto vectorization and SIMD is something magic created or done by the compilers, and there is no standardization between these compilers. So C++ library and the standard committee is coming out to standardize these things in terms of data types and STL algorithm. Is it?
You can say something like that. So right now, what is happening? There are a lot of these libraries are available, right? And compiler can do a global analysis of these structures of this library. These are mostly header-only libraries and that. So their compiler can do optimization, but still you have to use different libraries. So what C++ is saying, we will standardize these data types or will standardize these operations. So if the operation are standardized, what is happening with the data types, what is the content of that data type, compiler can rely on that, and it can do a better things while doing optimization. So it will they will not have to do a lot of analysis. So with the limited set of analysis, they will have more information available for their disposal.
Okay, get it. Yeah, thanks.
But the thing is, at the end, the operation needs to be supported. The instruction needs to be supported by a particular hardware. So it's not like something like a plugin that, okay, today you have a vector length of 512, and then you want to add some plugin like an external graphics card or something like that to get a more SIMD thing on a particular CPU core. It's not like that. It's built in a processor.
Okay.
And plus, if you want to force vectorization, there are a lot of libraries available which will do it for you. And these are header-only libraries, mostly licensed in MIT or BSD.
But these
Yes.
libraries are tightly coupled with my compiler because this is something generated by my compiler, right?
Yes.
And the problem with these libraries are you still have to understand a lot of SIMD things, right? You need to still understand what is vector length. You still need to understand what are vector operations possible, and that you still need a lot of these. But as and when this active vectorization will enable, in general use cases, it is still useful. So instead of doing optimization at O2, just go with O3.
Yeah, that's the simplest thing I can do. Yes. Yeah, thanks.
Mahendra, there is one question in Q&A section
Okay.
by Hari Krishna.
So if I enable vectorization, and how do I confirm whether it is enabled or not? So basically, you want to check it at runtime. If you see vectorization is not a runtime property, it is basically a compile time property. Once it is fixed that okay, compile time these instructions are generated, and if the control flow goes in that direction, no one can deny, not compiler, the operating system nor CPU can deny to execute a particular instruction. So no, you can't actually go and find out it using some runtime checks. Might be that okay, you might have some loops, high CPU utilization, but I'm not sure whether high CPU utilization means code is not vectorized. So it is
You
basically a
have
compile time checks.
you showed us a bunch of flags for both GCC and Clang, which we can use to check if the compiler optimized the code, and if not, then why. So you
Yes.
can use that if you want.
Yes. But again, just to tell you, these were like a toy examples which we covered here. If you run this on like a big project, you will get a lot of analysis. So you have to be clear on which file you want to run it, and then go step by step to approach this problem.
So, does it happen in debug mode? I don't think it happens in debug mode, right? Yeah. So that there might be a difference in the behavior of the program.
A compiler can take care of some lot of things where compiler can think okay, it can be unpredictable behavior. So yes, a lot of time when you are doing a debugging and when you are running with the release mode, you might get a different result, but it is not a problem of compiler. You might not have initialized your some arrays, you might not initialize variables when you are running in a debug mode. The memory is initialized to 0, but when you are running in a release mode, it is initialized to some garbage value and you get a crash. So same thing happens with the SIMD thing. There is no other possibility.